Well, good morning and welcome to the 2024 OTS Grant Application Workshop. My name is Nicole Aston and I am one of the branch chiefs with the Office of Traffic Safety, or OTS as we will refer to ourselves throughout. And I oversee our Road Safety Education branch. Under this branch is where all of our education programs are housed. May this be occupant protection, impaired driving, bicycle and pedestrian safety, distracted driving, just to name a few of the program areas, as well as some of the agencies that we partner with are Department of Public Health, Department of Transportation's, Office of Education's, a wide range of agencies that we see that are housing education grants.
And good morning. My name is Whitney Brazil. I am the other branch chief in the operations division, and I oversee the risky driving prevention branch. On our side, we handle the grants with the law enforcement agencies, which are our city and county law enforcement agencies, doing the police traffic services grant, as well as the motorcycle safety education grants, and the traffic records improvement projects.
We want to thank all of our traffic safety advocates for joining us today, and we really hope that you learn more about OTS and the program priority program areas that we cover within OTS. Just a couple housekeeping notes. Please make sure that you are muted at all times, as well as your cameras remain off. If you do have questions, we ask that you place them in the chat box, as we do have a team of folks that are monitoring that and will hopefully provide answers throughout. If not, if there's time at the end, we will also be responding to some questions live at the end. We also are recording this webinar and we hope to post it on our website, and it'll be available soon. So here is the vision, mission, and equity statement for OTS. A little bit about OTS, and we will get into more information later, is that OTS has been around for over 55 years, and our purpose is to administer grant funding provided by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And the purpose of this grant funding is to reduce serious injuries and fatalities on California roadways. Our typical annual budget is around $100 million. And it may sound like a lot, but California is a huge state and we have a crisis that's happening on our roadways right now. So we just need to make sure that our dollars are used in the most impactful and effective manner as possible. Also, just a side note about OTS. OTS is currently going through an expansion within our office. Currently, we have about 32 staff in our whole department, and we are adding 8 more folks to our operations side, which we are excited in this expansion so that it'll allow us to have more resources available to our partners in traffic safety, and to advance our grant management programs to also have subject matter experts to assist in certain priority program areas.
So part of our function here at OTS is to act as the liaison between our local government entities and NHTSA, or the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. In that, we have to apply for the federal funds just as our local government partners have to apply to us for federal funds. Part of our application is the California Highway Safety Plan, and this is available on our website. Currently, it is the fiscal year 2023 Highway Safety Plan. In there, you will see all of the projects for all of the program areas that we are planning on administering this year, this current fiscal year, and that is what NHTSA has approved. So if you want some ideas on the types of programs or grant activities that we are currently funding, that is a great resource that you can find on our website. In addition, we also put together the annual report at the end of each fiscal year. We've just wrapped up the 2022 annual report, That is not on our website yet. It is due to NHTSA the end of this month. It will be on our website soon. Currently, you have access to the 2021 annual report, which wraps up the activities and the goal attainment for the 2021 fiscal year. As Nicole was mentioning, we administer a large grant program every year, and we're going to talk about that more in the upcoming slides, and how your agencies can work together with our office in partner to improve traffic safety and reduce those fatalities and injuries on the roadways. We also have a media and marketing department, which we will talk about in the upcoming slides as well.
So I mentioned there's a crisis on our roadways. We're going to provide a couple different data sets throughout this presentation to give kind of the picture of what we're talking about and to give more insight as to what this crisis that we refer to is. This is our total traffic fatalities. As you can see here, it's California and the national. As we can also see, those trend lines are very similar to one another. So we were on a nice decline in our fatalities, both in the state as well as nationally. And we see that there's this spike that's starting an upward trend. This spike is for the 2020 data. And as we can see here, California is about 3,800, while a national is about 38,000. So California is about 10% of the nation's fatalities. This information comes from the FARS website, which is the Fatality Analysis Reporting System through the federal government. One thing I'm going to note is that we did use different data sources throughout as we share different data sets with you. Again, and it's just to give those different perspectives. What we are hearing and seeing is early preliminary numbers and projections for both 2021 and 2022 continue to show this upward trend, raising even more. Like I said, early projections are saying that the 2021 and 2020 years, or 2022 years, are well into the 4,000 range for the state of California. So like I mentioned, there's a crisis. It is, that trend is going in the complete wrong direction. And that's where we want to share what OTS can do and what we can do together, partnering with your organization to really change this trend and get this spike reversed into a downward motion. Here's again, just another snapshot on some data. This is a total traffic fatalities for California by age. You can see the age ranges listed there on the left-hand side. And each of those age ranges are broken down by gender. Dark blue is for males, light blue is for females. So again, just to show different the fatalities in different ways. This information does come from the Caltrans SHSP dashboard, and we will go into more of the different data sources later in this presentation. Here's also a breakdown of the California total traffic fatalities by race. And what we see here when looking at raw numbers is that Hispanic and white are the two leading categories. This is a snapshot of California total traffic fatalities, the top 10 counties. What we see here are that our larger counties are represented on this list here, which is to be expected in some degree because it is, they are our largest populated counties. This next slide gives a different perspective when it comes to our counties though. This is our top 10 counties by a fatality rate. So this takes into consider population and number of fatalities, not just the raw number of fatalities. And it provides a different picture, a very different picture. What we see here on this slide is a lot of our smaller, more rural counties. So what this tells us is that sometimes it's needed to look at the data in different ways. So instead of just looking at raw information, we can also convert it into rates so that we're able to get the different perspectives. This tells us our smaller rural areas do have problems, and we also need to address those as well.
So GHSA, or the Governor's Highway Safety Association, is also like a liaison between NHTSA and the state highway safety offices. Each state has its own state highway safety office, and GHSA puts together or interprets federal regulations and puts together tools for states and the traffic safety partners to use. The information that they put together is available on their website. One of the reports that they have put together with the assistance from State Farm was this document called America's Rural Roads, Beautiful and Deadly. This report talks about and explores rural road safety, what's causing crashes, and the behaviors that are causing those crashes. It also talks about the driving behaviors that can lead to crashes. So this is an excellent report if you have rural roads in your area that you want to do a traffic safety program on. This would be a great document to use as a resource or a tool, and it is available to you on the GHSA website.
All right, so we painted a little bit of the picture on our crisis on our roadways in California. So what does that mean for OTS or traffic safety in general? Like we mentioned, OTS administers a grant program. The grant program that OTS administers is for behavioral traffic safety grants. We do not handle infrastructure. That is done by our partners at Caltrans. So we focused on the behavioral aspect. So historically, in the traffic safety world, we've looked at things based on E's, whether it's 4 E's, 5 E's, 6 E's, whatever it's been over the years. And the ones that OTS primarily looks at are enforcement, education, and emergency medical services. Again, aligning with those behavioral grant programs. There's a new approach that's been adopted by the nation as well as our state, and that is called the Safe Systems approach. This Safe Systems approach aims to eliminate fatal and serious injuries for all road users by accommodating human mistakes and keeping impacts on the human body at tolerable levels. There's a lot of different components on this Safe System approach, and we will touch on them briefly in the upcoming slides. However, the key takeaway from this Safe Systems approach is that all organizations have a piece in this puzzle. All roles are important, and all roles need to work together to really make change.
So the Safe System approach is not a new concept. It has existed for more than 30 years in countries across the globe. Each of the early adopters of the Safe System approach have seen marked decreases in traffic fatalities across their roadway system, with at least a 50% reduction in fatalities. During the same period, the United States only saw a reduction by 11%. This shows promise that by implementing the Safe System approach in the United States, we may be able to achieve meaningful reductions in fatalities. The 6 Safe System principles are shown on the outside white ring of the graphic and are the fundamental beliefs that the approach is built on. They establish the goal in the Safe System approach, acknowledging human limitations, and set exceptions for how to act. Expectations, I am so sorry. A successful Safe System approach weaves together all 6 of these principles. On the inside pie-shaped blue area of the circle are the 5 Safe System elements. This is how the Safe System must be implemented through design that accommodates human mistakes and injury tolerances. Making a commitment towards 0 deaths means addressing every aspect of crash risk through the 5 elements.
So like Whitney mentioned, the 6 Safe System principles are the fundamental beliefs that the approach is built on. These 6 principles are based on a framework developed by other Safe System adopters outside of the United States, including Sweden, the Netherlands, Australia, and New Zealand. So I'm going to just touch on each one of these Safe System principles just real briefly to give a little bit of insight. So the first principle is that death and serious injury is unacceptable. While no crashes are desirable, the safe system approach prioritizes crashes that result in death and serious injury, since no one should experience either when using our roadway system. The next principle is that humans make mistakes. We are acknowledging that people will inevitably make mistakes that can lead to crashes. But can we design and operate the roadway system to accommodate human mistakes to avoid this death and serious injury that we're seeing? The next principle is that humans are vulnerable. People have a limited ability to tolerate crash impacts before death and serious injuries occur. Human tolerance to crash impacts is central to this safe systems approach. The management of the kinetic energy transfer to within survivability limits is important for understanding how to design and operate the roadway system consistently with this philosophy. The next principle is that responsibility is shared. System managers, vehicle manufacturers, law enforcement, post-crash personnel, and system users all have a responsibility to promote safe behavior and ensure that crashes don't lead to fatal or serious injuries. The next principle is that safety is proactive. In addition to crash-based analysis, transportation agencies should use proactive tools to identify and mitigate latent risks in the roadway system, rather than waiting for crashes to occur and reacting afterwards. This process, known as the systemic approach to safety, uses crash history, roadway design, and other data to identify patterns in geometric design that can lead to certain crash types. And the final principle is that redundancy is crucial. Reducing risk require that all parts of the roadway system are strengthened so that if one part fails, people are still protected.
As a nation, we're not making substantial progress on reducing these traffic deaths. And in order to make meaningful reductions, we need to rethink this approach. The safe system approach is an overall guided vision with the 5 safe system elements as conduits through which the safe system approach must be implemented. The first element is safe road users. This addresses the safety of all road users, including those who walk, bike, drive, ride transit, or travel by other modes. All road users are considered equal regardless of how they choose to travel. Each road user has a responsibility to operate to the best of their ability within the boundaries set by system managers, and education and enforcement can help to modulate that behavior. It is our responsibility to comply with these rules and ensure that we act within the limits of the road system design. System managers and law enforcement can use techniques like traffic or DUI enforcement, speed feedback signs, and education campaigns to promote compliance with rules. The next element is safe vehicles. Safe vehicles include active system or safety measures to help prevent crashes from occurring, such as autonomous emergency braking and passive safety measures, which protect occupants when a crash does occur, such as the seatbelts and airbags. Vehicle manufacturers are key stakeholders in continuously evolving these safety features. The next element is safe speeds. There is a direct linkage between safe speeds and our ability to survive a crash. Put simply, humans are unlikely to survive high-speed crashes. Adjusting speeds can accommodate human injury tolerance in 3 ways: reducing the impact force, providing additional time for drivers to stop, and improving the visibility. The next element is safer roads. Safe roads are designed and operate to prevent crashes and keep impacts to the human body at tolerable levels. Avoiding crashes involves separating users in space, which segregates the physical space to provide travelers with a dedicated part or right of way in the road. Separating users in time, assuming that users will need to occupy the same physical space on the roadway, but creates a safer environment by separating the users in time and reducing vehicle interactions with vulnerable road users, such as a pedestrian scramble. Increasing the attentiveness or awareness of the driver by removing parking spots on the corners to allow greater visibility of pedestrians who may be crossing the road, increasing street lighting, using rumble strips in the roadway, or flashing beacons. The last element is post-crash care. When a person is injured in a crash, they rely on emergency first responders to quickly locate them, stabilize their injury, and transport them to a medical facility. The post-crash care in the SAFE system extends beyond emergency services. Quick response and investigation by police and road managers can help ensure crash factors are documented and reported correctly. Clear traffic incidents so the traffic flow can be restored as safely and quickly as possible, and that the justice system can take appropriate action and the risk to future crashes can be mitigated through the appropriate design and program or policy changes.
Okay, so that is a little bit about the safe systems approach, just to give a very quick overview. So what does that mean when it comes to behavior traffic safety? Luckily, a document was put together from, again, GHSA, and it's called Putting the Pieces Together and is available on their website. In this document, it really addresses that there is an integral role of behavioral traffic safety and road user responsibility in the safe systems approach, and that it is a very important role that it plays. It also debunks the misconception that infrastructure alone can end road deaths and that behavioral traffic safety plays no role. That is not the case, as we have outlined in the past couple slides in this whole approach and the idea that it is a shared responsibility. It really does make it clear that all of the following are needed if we're looking at reducing traffic crashes, deaths, and injuries on our roadways. Infrastructure improvements are needed. Changes to road designs are needed. But what also is needed is equitable enforcement of traffic laws, education and public outreach, as well as emergency response. So again, not one of these is going to work our way out of this issue, this crisis that we're facing. We're not going to engineer our way out of this. We're not going to enforce our way out of this. We're not going to educate our way out of this. We really need all of our organizations, all of our partners, all that are responsible for keeping the roadway system safe to work together and to make this crisis on our roadways have this trend go in the opposite direction.
Here at OTS, we have made efforts to institutionalize the safe system approach and equity. We are making commitments and taking a comprehensive, inclusive, and equitable approach to delivering education, enforcement, and outreach programs. We have an OTS equity work group that has developed an action plan, and we are looking at programs and applications and evaluating them through both the safe system framework as well as an equity lens.
Okay, so what is all that we're saying here? Where were we with the 5 E's and where are we headed with this safe systems approach? This slide really wraps up everything that we just talked about and really gives that clear picture as to what the differences may be now when we're talking about the different approaches. So in a traditional approach, we used to look at, let's prevent crashes. Well, now we say, well, let's prevent death and serious injuries. Again, in the traditional sense, we said, let's improve human behavior. Well, now with the acknowledgement that humans are going to make mistakes and there are limitations, let's design for those. Previously, we would say control speeding. Well, now we're really looking at that system kinetic energy and to reduce that instead of just control speeding. Again, previously, It was individuals are responsible. As you've heard us mention throughout this safe systems approach, that's not the case anymore. We look at it as it's a shared responsibility. Everyone is responsible, not just individuals. And instead of reach based on crash history, let's expand the data sets that we're using. Let's expand on the information that's historically been looked at so that we can proactively identify and address these risks.
Our office has put together the Safe System Approach resource and toolkit. This focuses on the principal elements of the Safe System Approach. It's really giving that message and the concept of shared responsibility and creating the culture necessary to reach zero deaths. The website is on the screen there for you to be able to use that resource or toolkit. You can also contact us if you have trouble finding that toolkit, and we can help get that information to you so you have resources available.
Along with just that toolkit, as Whitney mentioned in the beginning, we also have a media and marketing side of OTS. One of the options that they have completed and have made available is just a media toolkit. The link is there for your access. And in this link and on our website, what you can find are a variety of different materials that have already been created free for you to use, for the public to use, for anyone to access and utilize. Some of the materials that you may find are videos, tip cards, flyers, activity sheets, activity books, and much more. All of our materials are currently available in English and Spanish. If you have a need of a different language, please reach out to us and we will see if we're able to assist. And as we do have our statewide messaging and it's one uniform message, we also now have the capabilities to make this, to create these messages and these resources with more of a local feel. As we know, each community within our state, which is very diverse, may have different needs in order to communicate with their communities and the community members. So please feel free to utilize our tools that we already have available. And if there's any specific needs, please feel free to reach out and we would assist with that.
Media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For those of you who have been grantees with us for a while, you probably know our Public Information Officer, Tim Weisberg. He has some help now. You may start seeing the name of Samantha DeMello or even Angela DePrado more often. They are both assisting Tim with the PIO or some of this campaign material. You can reach any of them at pio@ots.ca.gov. We are going to move forward with more of the grant program information at this point, starting with the funding authority or how we get our funds here at the Office of Traffic Safety or OTS. We get our funding because through the National Highway Safety Act, which was established in 1966, the State and Community Highway Safety Grant Program was made each governor responsible for managing highway safety funds. Ronald Reagan signed the California legislation into law in 1967, which created our office, which is the Office of Traffic Safety. In California, our office is structured under the California State Transportation Agency, which is also known as CalSTA. CalSTA is focused solely on transportation and consists of departments such as CHP, DMV, Caltrans, High Speed Rail, etc. Our funding that we grant to our local government partners really starts at the gas pump, and this tax that you spend at the gas pump goes to the Department of Transportation and then is allocated to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration or NHTSA. Each state, like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, has to apply for these funds from NHTSA, and then they're awarded to the government agencies. So again, our office is a pass-through entity. IJA, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is the most current act that was signed. We were previously working under the FAST Act, which gives us our authorization for funding. IJA is a bipartisan infrastructure deal that will rebuild America's roads, bridges, and rails and expand on other areas such as clean drinking water and high-speed internet. The current authorization is in effect until fiscal year 2026.
So like Whitney had mentioned, we are authorized under the IJA Act now. And as there's still work being done to come out with the final regulations that are associated with this, there's a couple things that we do know. One is that we are not losing any of our funding for any of our existing program areas. So that's really exciting news. We also do anticipate multiple expansions or flexibility, I should say, on allowable uses for some of our programs. Again, this is all being determined, so we're waiting for that final regulation to come out to help guide and tell us the details regarding this flexibilities. There are a couple things that we do know that we want to share with you today, and those are a couple new programs that came out of IJA. These two programs are going to be a very, very small set of funding that will be available to us and in turn to our partners. And the first is funding for preventing roadside deaths. And it's really to address the disabled vehicle safety issue. One of the notables on the new allowable use with these funds is to purchase digital alert technology that can be installed in emergency response vehicles to warn approaching drivers. The other new program area out of IJA is a driver and officer safety education. And what this will be is that states are now going to be required to have both a driver education program and a peace officer training program on what to do during traffic stops. Again, the purpose of this program is to cover the role of law enforcement, the legal rights of individuals, as well as consequences for failure to comply with the law when it comes to traffic stops. And again, these are both very, very small pots of funds, but we did want to share with you a couple of the new things that we do know that are coming out of IJA as we await the final details of our other expansions or flexibility on current funding.
So who is eligible to receive our funds? I think we've mentioned it a couple times. It's government entities, both county, state, and local government entities. With our biggest partners right now being law enforcement agencies, we also, as Nicole was mentioning in the beginning, work with public health departments, fire departments, judicial agencies, and so many other partners. For nonprofits who are interested in funding, they must have a host agency. We cannot fund them directly. So they do have to partner with a government agency in order to be eligible for the grant funding.
All right, so a little bit on our grant funding cycle. As mentioned, we do receive federal funds to administer our grant programs. Therefore, we do follow a federal fiscal year. As you can see at the top of the graphic here, it is December. That's where we are now, and we are in our grant solicitation period. Our applications are live and available, and we will touch on that later. Applications are due January 31st. So a very important day to remember for anyone that is seeking to apply for some of our funding with their programs. After applications are submitted during the months of February through April, we have our application reviews. This consists of teams reviewing each and every application that's submitted to OTS, as well as the review process that consists of different levels of management review. In June is when we expect to announce tentative grant awards. If a program does receive a tentative grant award, from the months of June through August is what we call our grant development period. During this time, our OTS staff will work with each of our partners that's receiving awards for the upcoming fiscal year, and it is to establish a grant that's going to be the most successful for OTS as well as that individual agency. So really, we work hand in hand to develop the most successful program that can be done. And then October 1st is when grants start. The federal fiscal year does run October 1st through September 30th.
On this slide, we kind of identify the program areas and the coordinators. For those of you who have current grants, you may see some names that are familiar to you. You can reach out to your current OTS coordinator, and they can assist you with any applications that you have. If you are expanding to a different program area, these are the names that could you want to jot down so that you can contact them and ask them questions about their program areas. In the bottom left corner, we also have our law enforcement liaisons. If you're new to our grant funding, or if you're a law enforcement agency who's new to our grant funding, you can contact our law enforcement liaisons, and they can assist you with what you need to be able to administer a law enforcement or police traffic services type grant. If you received the confirmation email, there were some attachments that were sent out last night. One of them is a law enforcement liaison handout, which also has their contact information. If you didn't get that, we can send that to you later, but you can also contact our main line and we can get you any contact information that you need as well. The office line or the main line will be available at the end of this PowerPoint.
All right, so now we're going to get into those program areas, priority program areas that we've referred to touch. We're going to touch on each one a little bit. We are going to provide some data sets for certain ones as we move through this. So here's just a snapshot of the different program areas that OTS would provide funding for. And we're going to continue through to touch on each of those. So the first program area is alcohol impaired traffic fatalities. Again, as we move through the different program areas, we are going to share those similar data sets that was shared in the beginning, just to give more insight and perspective as to what's occurring on our roadways. We see here once again that California follows the same trend lines as the nation. We see that dip in 2019, and then we see that spike in 2020. One thing to mention, with all of the spikes that we're seeing in 2020, this has been determined that even though the roadways were more empty and less cars were on the roads, what we saw was a lot more risky driving behaviors being done on our roadways, therefore leading to more severe crashes. Again, important to note, California is about 10% of the nation's fatalities. Again, here's that breakdown of impaired driving fatalities by age and gender. What we see here is the 21 to 30 age range being the most impacted. Here's also the breakdown by race for impaired driving fatalities. And our top 10 counties throughout the state when it comes to alcohol-involved traffic fatalities. One thing I want to note as well is that we really encourage all of our partners to use their local data when trying to figure out what their individual needs and problems are. As much as we are sharing a snapshot of California's problems, once you go into your local data and you get that picture, it can look significantly different than what we're sharing with you today. So we really encourage you, and you will hear us talk about this throughout the rest of our slides. Please utilize your local data when looking at traffic safety. So here's a slide that's a little bit different and that caught at least our eyes when we were looking at it. Here's our top 10 counties when talking about drug-involved traffic fatalities. What we see here is that our largest county in the state, Los Angeles, is not at the top. They are number 4 when it comes to drug-involved traffic fatalities. So what does this tell us? This tells us that there is a lot of areas and opportunities for improvement when it comes to our drug-involved traffic fatalities. There can be a lot of reasons for this, though, also. What we hear from our law enforcement partners is that there is a severe lack of DREs right now in our state. We also know that our toxicology testing for after the fact can be improved upon. So again, these are just a few opportunities that at least we've identified to really make this data more current so that it can really paint that picture for us and let us know what needs to be worked upon. So what do these activities look like when it's alcohol impaired programs and it comes to OTS and the things that we fund? High visibility enforcement activities. So what this can be is our DUI checkpoints and DUI saturation patrols. What we also find with our law enforcement agencies, an activity that's picking up, and more so it's on the education and public awareness side, is the Know Your Limit program. So when it comes to education and public awareness, though, for everyone, and including law enforcement, some of those typical programs that we see are every 15 minutes, sober grad events, as well as any other educational and public awareness opportunities within our schools, colleges, as well as communities. There are also some training programs available for our law enforcement partners that we support. One of them is the SFST course, Standardized Field Training. Oh, gosh.
Field sobriety training.
Thank you, Whitney. As well as A-RIDE.
Advanced roadside impaired driving.
Yes, thank you. So those are things that we could support with OTS funds as well. We also have programs throughout the state with our probation departments in which that purpose is for them to have a specific caseload of DUI or DUID probationers, and it's to provide intensive supervision to our most at risk as well as repeat DUI offenders. We also have DUI court programs throughout the state that also their goal is to reduce recidivism amongst, again, our most high risk and repeat DUI offenders. When talking about drug impaired programs, at this point, there aren't specific high visibility enforcement activities for drug impairment only. When we look at alcohol impairment and drug impairment, we consider them more as just impairment. And so again, what we would find here is our DUI checkpoints as well as DUI saturation patrols, which it's just focused on any and all impaired driving. There's also additional training and certifications for our law enforcement partners, and that's the DRE course, Drug Recognition Expert course, to again help identify the impairment of drugs within an impaired driver. Throughout the state, we also have many programs with our county district attorney offices or city attorney offices for vertical prosecution of impaired drivers. What this program allows is personnel, a prosecutor, to have a case from intake and prosecute it all the way through sentencing. This really allows us to utilize prosecutors that have the education, experience, and knowledge when it comes to prosecuting those impaired driving cases. And also we have our education and public awareness programs throughout the state. Really, the purpose of these is to stress to the media as well as to our communities the dangers of driving while under the influence of either marijuana, prescription and illicit drugs, or a combo of any of those. We do have one of our programs in Southern California that actually partners with the cannabis dispensaries to provide that education to those folks that come in there.
Our next program area is distracted driving. We don't have a data slide to show you because the data for distracted driving is really underreported. A lot of times it's not necessarily the primary crash factor in a crash, or it's not reported as a primary crash factor because sometimes it takes the driver to admit to the distraction. When we're looking at distraction, it can be a variety of things. It doesn't just have to be a cell phone, whether they're talking or using their apps. It can be whether they're eating, grooming themselves. There's multiple things that can take a driver's attention from the roadway, which is distracted driving. So to combat this in these program areas, we do the high visibility enforcement activities, which are for our law enforcement agencies to go out and do distracted driving enforcement during grant-funded overtime. And they're really focused on all of the distractions on the roadways, or that takes the driver's attention from the roadways. We ask the law enforcement agencies to send or save some of these operations for April, which is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. We also have education and public awareness activities that we do to educate teens, parents, community groups on the dangers of driving distracted. These campaigns can also include multimedia, public awareness campaigns, education materials, and so on. In this program area, we also include drowsy driving education.
Our next program area is our emergency medical services area. Within this area, OTS will provide grants for emergency medical service providers, most likely fire departments or EMS. What we see when we get requests for these grants is that they typically are regional grants where we have multiple stations that are applying for one grant for multiple sets of equipment. Some of these typical extrication equipment that we see requests for could be spreaders, cutters, combi tools, rams, struts, and airbags. Most recently, we're seeing requests for hydraulic tools to replace either old or outdated hydraulic tools or just any tools in general. These grants can also include the training that's needed on how to utilize these new equipment pieces. And really the sole purpose of these grants is to, once a emergency vehicle has responded to a crash, is to extricate the victim in a quicker manner to get them to the care that's needed, whether that be a hospital, trauma center, wherever the case may be. But it's really to reduce that extrication time to get the victim to the care that's needed quicker.
Next up is our motorcycle program area. Here you can see that California is following that national number, and we still maintain at about 10%. California maintains about 10% of that national number. Interesting to note is that nationally, about 40 to 50% of motorcycle riders who died in single vehicle crashes were also alcohol impaired. So there's a lot of times that our program areas will overlap with other program areas. California also is the second highest in the nation when it comes to motorcyclist fatalities. We are second to Florida. Here is another snapshot of the motorcyclist fatalities by age. Again, this is that 21 to 30 age group. And this information, just to remind you, may look different depending on your city or county. So please make sure that you are looking at this data from a more local perspective. This information we were able to pull from the Caltrans SHSP dashboard. Then we have the motorcyclist fatalities by race. And this also came from the same dashboard from Caltrans SHSP. Here is the top 10 counties with motorcyclist fatalities, and this was pulled from the UC Berkeley TIMS webpage, and Nicole will mention or talk more about some of the different data sources later on in the PowerPoint. So if you have questions about some of these data sources, we will go over them. So taking a deeper look at the motorcycle safety program area, again, that high visibility enforcement activity is listed there on the slide, and that's for our law enforcement partners to do enforcement of not just motorcycle riders, but really any road users who's causing collisions with motorcyclists. It's to prevent that motorcyclist from crashing and make the roadways safer for the motorcycle riders. Just like for distracted driving, the law enforcement agency can do this type of enforcement throughout the grant year, but we ask them to save some of the operations for the Awareness Month, which for motorcycle safety is in May. We also do education and public awareness, including hands-on training. The hands-on training, we currently have about 7 to 8 grants in the state of California that are doing these programs, such as a Ride to Live program. This is a course for the general public to attend at no cost and learn the maneuvering capabilities of a motorcycle. It's to teach them so that they're on the bike with law enforcement personnel, teaching them the maneuvering capabilities. It's usually about an 8-hour course, and the majority of it is hands-on riding lessons. So we are looking to expand on the number of law enforcement agencies who are providing this hands-on training to the general public. If you are interested, please contact us. We can assist you with developing these education type programs for the general public, because this is an area that we want to expand upon. Of the 7 or 8 agencies that we currently have doing this hands-on training, only one is in Northern California. The rest are in our Southern California area.
The next program area we want to talk about is occupant protection. Again, we do have our high visibility enforcement activities that are conducted. This is most notably known as our Click It or Ticket campaign period. We also have a variety of education and public awareness activities within occupant protection. Our largest would be our child safety seat programs that we have. Within these child safety seat programs, we see a variety of activities, whether it's education to parents or caregivers on how to install the child safety seat in the vehicle, as well as the child in the child safety seat. There can be checkup events, which can be done at a Target parking lot or just somewhere where the community members can come to that event and get their vehicles inspected, as their vehicles and the safety seats inspected, as well as individual appointments that would do the same thing. We also do fund the purchase and distribution of child safety seats, in which case at these events or individual appointments, if it's determined that the incorrect child safety seat is being used, either based on the age of the seat, the age of the child, or the size of the child, our partners would be able to provide at no cost a new safety seat to these families that are in need. We also have our safe senior driver programs throughout the state that really just focus on making sure that our older drivers are the safest that they can be in their vehicles. When talking about training and certifications and the child passenger safety programs, there is a NHTSA CPS training certification that's needed for individuals to conduct these checkup events or individual appointments. So we would provide funding for the attending to those training events as well. Next program area is pedestrian and bicyclist safety. On this slide, we're going to show pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities. Again, we're showing our California numbers compared to the nation's numbers. At the top, there's pedestrian, bottom is bicyclist. So there's some differences when it comes to these data sets that's different from all the others that we've shown so far. At least for 2020, California is showing a downward trend, while the nation is showing an upward trend. However, with the spike in total fatalities for 2021 and 2022, we would anticipate that these numbers and this trend could result in going the opposite direction in California to match up with the national trend. Couple interesting things to note is that California is not the typical 10% of the nation's fatalities when it comes to pedestrians. We are actually 15% of the nation's fatalities. Again, huge problem here in California, one that we need to partner with anyone and everyone to try to reverse these numbers and these trends. California is also second in the nation when it comes to pedestrian fatalities. Texas is number 1. And when it comes to the cities with the highest amount of pedestrian fatalities, Los Angeles tops that list, with New York being second with about 20 fewer fatalities. Again, just to give perspective as to where California sits in comparison to the nation. When it comes to bicyclist fatalities, again, a couple things to note. We are not at that 10% of the nation's fatalities. Again, we are at 14% of the nation's fatalities, as well as California is second in the nation to Florida when it comes to bicyclist fatalities. Here's that breakdown by age and gender for pedestrian fatalities. As we see here also, our 21 to 30 age range is not the heaviest impacted. This is more evenly rounded out, with actually our 31 to 40 age group being the heaviest impacted. Here's our breakdown of pedestrian fatalities by race. Total or top 10 counties when it comes to pedestrian fatalities. And here's a bicyclist fatalities breakdown by age and gender. Again, we see some differences when it comes to our bicyclist fatalities, more evenly spread out through all of our age range, and actually 51 to 60 is the heaviest impacted on these. There's our breakdown for bicyclist fatalities by race in our state. And again, our top 10 counties. And we can't stress enough, please utilize your own local data to really see what the problem is in your community, because again, it can look very different from the information that's been displayed right now. So what does that mean for OTS activities when it comes to pedestrian and bicycle safety? Again, we have our high visibility enforcement activities that our law enforcement partners do. When they're conducting these enforcement activities, they're looking at all road users and how they can interact and be the safest on a roadway system. So we are not targeting pedestrians, we are not targeting bicyclists, they're looking at all of the roadway users and enforcing any laws that pertain to the safety of all roadway users. We also have a variety of education and public awareness activities that we see done within OTS grants. A lot of these had to pivot during the COVID pandemic because a lot of them used to be conducted in person. Some of them were changed to a virtual format, and we are seeing that a lot of them are getting back out and being able to do some in-person activities. So we're very excited about that. Some of these typical activities would be our bicycle rodeos. And we used to see these mostly conducted in our schools. We're now seeing them conducted in our schools as well as communities for adults. We also have walking field trips that can be done. And one example of this is if there's a nearby senior center, there could be a group that goes to that senior center and they actually walk a route, whether it be a grocery store or something within their area that they are taking those walks daily. So they walk this route with them to identify the different risks and the safest route that they should take, as well as a variety of educational presentations that can be done. We also have programs that are community engaged assessments, and this has to do with walking and bicycle traffic safety. So what's done is that there is a group of or a variety of different local entities that are brought together, whether it's community members, police departments, Department of Transportations. They're brought together and they really do address a certain community or neighborhood when it comes to the traffic safety and either deficiencies and needs or challenges. And what's done is that there is a report that's conducted and provided to them on next steps and how to make their neighborhood or their community safer for those that are walking and biking.
Next up, excuse me, we're going to talk about speeding related fatalities. As you can see on the graphs on the screen, excuse me, speeding related fatalities have really been on the rise since 2019. And as we all know, in recent years, with the decrease in the number of vehicles on the roadways, the risky driving behaviors increased, which includes speeding. And there really has been an uptick in the speeding related incidents, especially with the citations in excess of 100 miles per hour. With these higher speeds, as we discussed earlier, there are going to be more fatalities when they do crash. Here's a snapshot of speeding related fatalities by age, and this is that 21 to 30 age group. And then again by race. And a snapshot of the top 10 counties for speeding related fatalities. So looking at our police traffic services program, we have grants or templated grants available in our selective traffic enforcement program or our STEP program. In these grants, we do high visibility enforcement activities, which is a proven countermeasure in the NHTSA's countermeasure that works document. Nicole, again, will talk about some of the resources later on, but we do look at that NHTSA countermeasures that work. And in there, you're going to find high visibility enforcement activities as well as DUI checkpoints are in those top areas for behavior change. So when we talk about high visibility enforcement activities, we're really talking about sending out multiple officers on one operation. For example, if you're driving down a roadway and your average driver sees a police officer with a vehicle pulled over, they're going to slow down, and then as soon as they pass that vehicle, they're going to speed back up. However, if they see a lot of officers out with multiple vehicles pulled over on a stretch of roadway or in a section of town, their driving behavior will change while they're in that area. They will slow down. You may even get additional social media posts about, don't watch your speed or don't drive recklessly in this city or this county because they're out in force today. And that's wonderful to hear because we want that type of media coverage or that type of reach when we're doing our operations. So really those high visibility enforcement activities are emphasized in our grants as we move forward with our law enforcement agencies. We also want to focus on those primary crash factors. And like Nicole and I have been mentioning, that may look different from city to city. In some cities, impairment may be that primary crash factor. In others, it may be speed, red light violations, improper turns, etc. And those primary crash factors can even change throughout the grant year if you are awarded funding. So when we're talking enforcement operations, we've talked about it in each of the program areas. There are multiple enforcement operations that can be done in these STEP grants. DUI checkpoints, DUI saturation patrols, traffic enforcement, distracted driving, motorcycle safety, bicycle and pedestrian enforcement operations. We're even doing operations in some areas for street racing and sideshow activities. In addition, we've also added our countywide collaborative efforts. These countywide collaborative efforts are to do enforcement operations outside of your city or county to help your neighboring agencies with their operations. There are lots of benefits to doing these countywide collaborative efforts. One could be if you have a new sergeant or primary contact on the grant and they want to see how an operation is conducted, or maybe they want a new idea and maybe a neighboring agency is doing it a little bit differently, they can go assist in that operation to get that training or new idea. Also, if you are running a checkpoint, but you have low staffing levels, and your neighboring agencies have the countywide collaborative efforts in their grants, they can come to your checkpoint and be paid out of their own grant and assist you with that checkpoint so that you can still conduct that checkpoint with the officer safety in mind. In our grants, we also like to see education or public awareness in addition to the enforcement. So whether that means you're going out and doing some education at a community event, a school, anything. It doesn't matter the program area. We just like to see a combination of both the enforcement and education in our police traffic services grant. Nicole also mentioned some training for the enforcement grants, the SFST or standardized field sobriety testing, A-RIDE, advanced roadside impaired driving, and DRE, drug recognition experts. Those are all trainings that we ask our law enforcement agencies to do. The DRE numbers have declined significantly in the state of California with the pandemic. And that was due to trainings not being offered, officers either retiring or not being able to do the evaluations to maintain that certification. Before the pandemic, we had close to 2,000 DREs throughout the state. As of, I believe it was the beginning of this year, we were down to about 1,200. So that is a significant reduction in our DREs. And we really want to see an increase in that number to get back up to that mark where we were just a few years ago. The other training that we can offer under the Police Traffic Services program is crash reconstruction. We also do DUI checkpoint planning and management, as well as this street racing or sideshow training, which helps officers detect those modified vehicles. In our traffic records program, we have our TRIP grants or our traffic records improvement projects. And this again is for our law enforcement agencies or departments. This isn't to improve your crash system or your citation system. If you already have an electronic system, but maybe it's not like your crash system isn't communicating with CHP's system and you aren't able to submit your crash reports electronically, we can also provide funding to do an interface to allow the systems to talk to each other. So there are grants available to upgrade your system, and there is an emphasis to get all agencies to be able to submit crash reports electronically so we can have that snapshot of or improved data on crash reports and timely data.
All right, so those are the program areas that OTS provides funding for and some of the typical activities that we see within our grant programs. So now you've heard about those and you're excited, you know you have problems in your community, and you think that our funding would be able to help address those problems. So what do? You submit your application that, again, we will talk about in a couple slides from here on that application process. However, when preparing to submit your application, one thing that you need to do is you need to identify your problem. This is a very crucial step within the OTS application process because, like we've mentioned, every community has a different issue, and we don't know what those issues are or what those problems are unless you share with us. So when looking at problem identification, what we're hoping that you do is you identify the 5 W's. So who are involved when it comes to your traffic safety problems? Is it young drivers, DUI drivers, drivers over 65? If you can, please identify who your issue is within your community. What are the types of crashes that are happening? Again, is it impaired driving crashes? Is it pedestrian crashes, bicyclist crashes, rear-ending, unsafe turns? Really define what that problem is. Where are your crashes happening? Do you have a top 10 locations that you can identify? Is it a certain intersection or intersections, certain neighborhood, different road segments? Again, the more information, the better to really paint that picture for us and let us understand what it is that you're facing. When are the crashes happening? Is it during morning commute, evening commute, in the evening or in the nighttime, weekdays, weekends? Really dig into your data and show us that picture. And then why? If you do know the why, we do know that there are some confusing roadway configurations. Or are there engineering issues? Like we mentioned, we do not fund infrastructure. However, if you know your why and that is part of it, please identify that. One of the other opportunities is, as much as we don't fund infrastructure, if there was an improvement that was made and maybe your community doesn't understand how to navigate through that new infrastructure improvement, we can provide the education to help your community understand how to safely navigate those infrastructure improvements that were recently done.
So for the grant selection criteria, there are multiple factors that we look at when we're selecting applications to receive our funding. I think Nicole touched on it in the beginning, that we have application review teams that look at the different applications. And as we were mentioning in the beginning, we are expanding. So we do have some new coordinators that will be also looking at some of the applications. So problem identification is key because not everybody's going to know what is happening in your city, and they may not be familiar with your city or county at all. So explaining that problem and really digging in to paint that picture is very important when we're analyzing your application. We want to make sure that that you have a reasonable funding request, that it matches what's identified in your problem identification. So if you're applying for a pedestrian problem, that's really what needs to be identified in that problem identification. Or if you're asking for a piece of equipment, a changeable message sign, a speed feedback sign, we need to know why you need those pieces of equipment, and we expect to find that in your problem identification, including both data and a narrative as to what that problem is. So we're looking at the problem, we're looking at, is your funding request reasonable? We're also looking at your local data. Like we've been mentioning, local data is very important to paint that picture because it's going to look different for each area. You can use multiple data sources, our OTS crash rankings, any statistical data, and local data is all a great to add into your problem identification. We're also looking at your past grant performance. Did you complete your objectives? Did you use all the funding that you had available? How much funding was left on the table and what were the reasons why it was left on the table? We know that the last couple of years for multiple agencies across the board, law enforcement, public health departments, everyone, it's been a challenge to complete these grant objectives. And so there may be years where you weren't able to because of the pandemic, and we understand that, and we do take that into account as well. But we do look at your past grant performance, and we do evaluate based on the need what you can handle. So if there's staffing changes or any changes to the way that you're doing your program coming out of the pandemic, we also want to know that as well.
Couple additional grant selection criteria that we look at would be that your costs that you've included in your application are allowable. A couple of things to note here is, like we've mentioned throughout, infrastructure is something that we cannot provide funding for. So unfortunately, if there's a request for any infrastructure improvements, we would not be able to move forward with that part of the application. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to equipment, and for OTS and the federal government, equipment is defined as one item with a unit cost of $5,000 or more would be considered equipment. And that does have to comply with the Buy America Act. So made, manufactured, or assembled in America. We know that this does provide limitations to some of the items that may be needed by our partners. So again, just something to keep in mind. The other thing when it comes to allowable cost is that California does have a travel ban for certain states. So if you're looking at trainings or conferences that are outside of the state of California, please make sure to check California's travel ban, as I believe there's about 20 states that unfortunately we would not be able to support travel to for any kind of conference or training. Another criteria that we look at is propose solutions. So there is a section in the application where you can identify any strategies, agency qualifications, and the value of your program. Again, just to give us more insight as to you've identified your problem. Here's your program that you want to put in place to try to combat that problem. And it gives us more of the information regarding your program. Partnerships and collaborations. We always enjoy hearing how much you guys are working together within your own communities, counties, cities, or even throughout the state. So please make sure to identify any partnerships or collaborations that you already have established or that you're looking to either expand upon or establish any new partnerships and collaborations. Again, it really just gives us a better picture of what could be happening either within your county, city, community, or statewide when it comes to the program that you are applying for. As well as the advancing equity. In our applications, there are a couple of questions that really just gives us that insight as to if you're providing programs to populations that are disproportionately affected. So really let us know, what area do you intend to reach and who are going to be your audiences?
On our website, we also offer the OTS crash rankings. The crash rankings are based on the empirical Bayesian method, which takes into account multiple factors when developing these rankings that will rank each city in California based on other like-sized cities. For example, on our screen, we have Sacramento, which is an A-sized city. On the right-hand column, you can see that there are 15 A-sized cities. So for alcohol involved, Sacramento is 2 out of 15, which means they're second worst in the state of the A-sized cities. So you don't want to be number 1 or number 2, but this kind of allows you to compare yourself to other similar sized cities. On the screen here, we're showing the 2019, but we just recently posted our 2020 rankings, so that is now available on our website.
So continuing on with the data, and like we've mentioned, there are different data sources that we have used throughout this presentation, as well as that we encourage you to use when looking at your problem identification. There was an attachment to the email sent yesterday as a reminder for this webinar with a list of data resources. But if you did not receive that, if you contact our office, we can always assist, as well as if you go to our website, there's also a section on there for data resources that contains all of this information as well. So one, we keep talking about it because it is so important to utilize your local data that could be available to you. The other thing is our OTS crash rankings, which Whitney just mentioned. That is a great resource to give you an idea of where you may be in the state. But there are other things that you can use besides just those. NHTSA also has a couple resources within their website. They have their Fatality and Injury Reporting System tool, or it's known as the FIRST tool, as well as the document Whitney mentioned earlier, Countermeasures That Work. And this document provides more of those activities that have been approved and deemed effective. Another resource here in the state of California is our SWITR system, which is our data repository that's handled by CHP. And this is the statewide integrated traffic record system. As you've seen throughout our presentation, we have utilized 2020 data as that is the most recent that's been finalized. We do understand that there are preliminary numbers that can be used. There's also the UC Berkeley SafeTrek Transportation Injury Mapping System. This is the TIM system. This is a system that we are hearing more and more as of late from our partners on how beneficial it is to them. This is more of a visual tool that can be used and a mapping tool that can be used. So in here, it really allows you to drill down into the different data sets that come from a crash report. So this TIM system is based on SWITR's data. SWITR's data comes from the crash reports that are taken by law enforcement. And in TIMS, you can filter and search for any of those fields that are located on the front page of your crash report. So you can look at just your impaired driving victims. You can look at just pedestrians, or you can look at things as a whole. You can also go into the mapping feature, in which you can select either one roadway, a little neighborhood, multiple intersections, and you can do a time lapse. So you can see whether it's from the last 2 years, the last 5 years, to really get a picture as to where exactly and what exactly are the problems within your city, county, or community. The last to mention is the California Driving Under the Influence Management and Information System, or the DUI MIS report and newly created dashboard that is completed by DMV. Again, all these resources can be found on our website, as well as the handout that was provided in the email. If you do not have any of those, or you need assistance, again, reach out to our office and we are here to help.
So in order to apply for one of our grants, you must have access to our grants electronic management system, which is also known as GEMS. If you are a current grantee, you may already have access, but if you haven't logged into the system in a while, you will need to reestablish your password. You can, or if you need to create a new account, you can also do this through our website. The link is on the screen. An email will be sent to you to reset your password, but please keep in mind that the passwords, that the link has limitations on how long it's active, and that oftentimes, because these password emails are, or reset emails, are system generated, they end up in your junk or spam folder. So please check those folders for that email to come through.
Okay, so now it's time to apply. A couple things I wanted to mention is that, one, agencies are allowed to apply for more than one OTS grant. OTS also has some pre-completed or pre-templated applications within the system. So like Whitney mentioned, you need to go into our GEMS system. That is where everything is done. If you don't have access, you need to get access before. You create a new application. You can create a new application for each program that you may be applying for. And you can also select a drop-down list to look at what templates are already in the system to benefit you with some pre-populated goals and objectives, as well as some budget items. Also important to note, when it comes to our applications and our grants, there are no maximum or minimum limits when it comes to the amount of funding that's being requested. What we do ask, though, is you just ensure that your funding limits that you're applying for match up with that problem ID that you've identified, as well as the program that you're looking to put into place. So as long as everything is aligned, that's really what we look at. Also, when it comes to OTS applications, as they're being reviewed and recommendations are being made, there's a couple different ways that it can be done. One is we can look to fund an application at the full amount that's listed. We can recommend to fund an application at a partial amount that's been requested, as well as we can recommend to not fund an application at all. So there are different levels of the recommendations that can be made within the application review process. Like we mentioned, applications are live. So once we're done with this webinar, you may log into GEMS and you can create that new application for the 2024 grant year. They are available on our website through our GEMS portal. And again, they are due January 31st, 2023. That is a Tuesday. And what I would recommend is do not wait till the last minute. Our system would allow for an application to be submitted up into 11:59 p.m., but we are not working until 11:59 p.m. Our office does close at 5 p.m., and that is when our staff would last be available to assist you. So before you get to the point where you want to throw your computer, please reach out to us. We have a lot of friendly faces and voices that are here willing to assist you through this process to help you get your application done. So like I mentioned, don't wait till the last minute. Get into our system early. really navigate through it, understand all the requirements that are needed in the application process, so that you're not waiting till the last minute. The other thing that can happen is with any electronic system, it can get bogged down at times if there is a huge user presence within the system. So to avoid any and all frustrations, please work on it early and contact us if you need any assistance at all.
If you need our contact information, it is up on this slide. This is our main office line, so if you are not working with a current program coordinator, you can contact this main number and they can assist you in connecting you with the right person. So please, like Nicole was saying, we're here to help. We are looking forward to seeing your successful applications.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining us today and learning a little bit about OTS. Most importantly, though, thank you guys for what you do each and every day when it comes to traffic safety in the state of California. We really appreciate everything that each and every one of you are doing, and we look forward to knowing how we can partner in the future to continue with programming or even create new programming with you. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will address them as they come into the chat.
Is the victims killed and injured the per capita or raw number? It should be per capita, otherwise larger cities will get funding when the small populated cities are missed. What is the process?
So there's a question in the chat about the per capita victims. And that is, as Nicole was mentioning in the beginning, that's really important when it comes to fatality rates. And that is just a different way of looking at the data. And we don't want to miss those smaller areas that have those higher fatality rates. So if that was your question, or if you have some concerns in your more rural areas about the smaller number of fatalities or fewer number of fatalities, especially when it comes to Los Angeles, you can display that information through a fatality rate, which is also considered, and we don't want to overlook any of those smaller areas because each and every fatality is important.
If applying as a nonprofit under a host government agency, would the host government agency apply in GEMS?
Yes, great question. For any of our nonprofit partners out there that are applying with a government entity, the government entity is the one that will have to have access to GEMS and complete the application process, as well as if a grant is awarded, the host agency is the one responsible for inputting any of the claiming information as well as quarterly reporting. So all of the responsibility falls on that host agency, as well as access when it comes to the nonprofits. All right. Thank you again to everyone. We will continue monitoring the chat box and answering any questions. We also will be posting this presentation, like we mentioned, the recording as well as the slide deck on our website. So it would be available to be accessed at any later time. And again, if you ever have any questions, please do not hesitate, reach out to our team and we would be happy to assist.
Thank you.